LSU has 12, count them, 12 official visitors on campus this weekend for a massive recruiting haul. We've got everything you need to know. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Brian Kelly and the Tigers are headed into a massive recruiting weekend. No other way to say it. They will have a dozen players on official visits on campus this weekend. You want to talk about solidifying the number one recruiting class in the country for 2026? This is an amazing way to do it. As we mentioned in the On3 composite, LSU with 9 commitments right now, headlining among them Tristan Keys, the number one wide receiver in the country, Richard Anderson, the number one defensive lineman in the country, Haven Finney, who was the number one cornerback in the country for 2027, reclassified. He's now a 2026 member. Jabari Mack, Aiden Hall, all top 100 prospects. You have 9 commits right now, and you've got 12 blue chippers coming to campus this weekend. So every week we catch up with our guy, Shea Dixon from On3, the Bengal Tiger. And among the headliners are 2 names that if you don't know yet, you have got to know for the duration of this cycle. One of the best offensive linemen in the country and the best remaining quarterback on the board, which is a spot LSU desperately needs to address.
Yeah, no, it's usually, you have 5 guys, 7 guys, and maybe once hit double digits over the next month of when kind of official visit season is really kicking into high gear for every college football team around the country. So why not start it off with 12 guys? You've got about the heaviest weekend you can get, and I think you've got to begin with kind of a 1A and 1B of the 5-star, Emmanuel Iheanacho, who, coming out of Maryland, Matt, this is an offensive tackle. He's the number 2 offensive tackle, number 1 offensive tackle. He's kind of flip-flopped a bit there, but a top 3 overall player. He and Jackson Cantwell, another player, offensive tackle, have kind of jumped each other a bunch, but he's considered widely one of the most coveted recruits still on the board. He's uncommitted, and LSU went from kind of a dark horse to even make like a top 8 to their, like Steve Wiltfong, On3's one of On3's national reporters that we have, feels like, hey, look, beyond a team like Oregon, maybe LSU is the next team up, which would be a massive surge up his list. So this weekend is key, getting him in town for an official with kind of the decision makers around this process and him really getting a feel for LSU. And he'll do so at the same time as a lot of other high-profile recruits, including a quarterback. They don't have one committed right now. Obviously, we know how the Bryce Underwood commitment and flip to Michigan happened kind of in the 11th hour there for him this past cycle. They didn't sign a high school quarterback. They did go get an SEC starter in Van Buren out of the portal, as Nussmeier's backup, we presume. But not signing a high school quarterback, you're not going to do that 2 years in a row. So who do you get now? And Bowe Bentley is a top 5 quarterback on 3. He's uncommitted, and he's now down to just LSU and Oklahoma. And in the span of 7 days, he'll be on both campuses. It'll be LSU this weekend, Oklahoma the following weekend, and he's a Texas kid coming out of Salina. So after that, I wouldn't be surprised if in short order, or at some point before his senior year begins, he's going to go ahead and make his decision between those 2 teams. And we'll find out if LSU gets a top 5 quarterback or if they have to pivot to the next guy on Joe Sloan's board.
And there's no telling who the next guy on Joe Sloan's board would be, which is why Bowe Bentley is just a massive, massive target. He's the number 75 overall prospect in the country. We've talked plenty about him. He's out of Salina in Texas, 6'1", 200 pounds, the number 7 quarterback in the on-3 composite, number 75 nationally. If you don't get Bowe Bentley, if he picks Oklahoma, then you're back in the transfer portal. You either have to flip someone else's quarterback or you're back in the transfer portal. And I'll remind you, while yes, Garrett Nussmeier will be gone after 2025, and presumably Michael Van Buren will be back and in line to be your starter, there's no guarantees that Colin Hurley returns. And you didn't sign a quarterback in 25, you'd be in line maybe not to sign a quarterback in 26. Would you be back in the portal for 1 or 2 prospects? It gets hairy if you don't get Bowe Bentley. Iheanacho, who you heard Shay mention, may feel like a little bit of a long shot, and he's on the on-3 prediction machine. They've got him 86% to Oregon. Again, this kid out of Baltimore, 6'6", 350, the number 3 overall prospect in the country. But you've got Brad Davis. You have Alex Atkins on staff. You have a lot to sell with Will Campbell and Emory Jones. Playing time as a freshman. Will Campbell, a first-round draft pick, number 4 overall, a fun offense to play in. Immediate playing time is a question because if Tyree Adams and Weston Davis both start this year and they both return in 2026, there may not be immediate playing time available, at least not a tackle we'd see. But Iheanacho would be a massive get if you could land him. So put your best foot forward this weekend. So that's 2. We mentioned there was 12. Shay also highlighted some of the other top-tier visitors that'll be on LSU's campus this weekend.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think I counted it earlier, of the 12 kids, more than half of them are ranked in the top 50, regardless of position on 3. But Jalen Lott is a kid who's coming out of Texas. He's a number 2 athlete in the whole country, but top 10 player in Texas. We talked about the wide receivers. They have 3 committed, and maybe the best receiver class in the country, you could argue for sure right now. But one of the top remaining targets, Calvin Russell, a kid out of Florida, top 5 player in Florida, top 5 receiver in the country. He'll be back on campus. The list kind of goes on and on. Let me try to look in here at some of the edge rusher group that Kevin Peoples is bringing in, and Blake Baker's impressive. Jamarian Carlton's a kid out of Temple, Texas. He's a top 10 edge rusher, top 5 player in Texas. Trenton Henderson out of Florida. He's a top 5 player in Florida, top 5 edge rusher in this class. So deep group there. And look, even on the D-line, I guess we kind of break it up, Matt, into your edge rushers or your ends and your stand-up guys, and your D-line are going to be your tackles and nose tackles. But Deuce Geralds out of Georgia is the top 5 D-lineman, top 100 player. But his dad played at Scotlandville and signed with Frank Wilson at Ole Miss. So he's still got a lot of family in Baton Rouge. Obviously, he told me before, grew up kind of beyond rooting for Ole Miss, and his dad had played there, but being a fan of LSU because that's where all of his family was from. So even though he's got Georgia next to his name, and that's where he's ranked in kind of the state rankings coming out of Collins Hill, I think a lot of people consider him to be have enough Baton Rouge ties to where it's pretty notable. And now that he's a top 5 D lineman in the country, it felt like only yesterday that he was coming up through the ranks and had gotten an offer and, was a sophomore in high school. Now he's about to be a senior, and lo and behold, one of the best players in America. So we'll see if Frank Wilson can't, and Kyle Williams, who obviously is your new D-line coach, but can't pull some magic from back in the Ole Miss days and work those connections on a guy like Deuce Geralds.
Shay highlighted more than half of the visitors that will be on LSU's campus. I want to come back and give you a little bit more context on the guys he just mentioned and a little bit of a deep breath with a couple of big-time prospects, one that's committed to LSU, one that LSU desperately wants, who will be on other campuses this weekend. We'll get to that as we continue Locked on LSU, your team every day. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player There's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. The Oklahoma City Thunder are in the NBA Finals. You think SGA is going to get it done? Why not bet on it? You could do it over at FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. So head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. So Shea mentioned a handful of prospects that are going to be on LSU's campus this weekend. Of course, we talked about Iheanacho and Bentley, but after that, consider some of these prospects. Calvin Russell, the number 33 overall player in the country. He's a wide receiver out of Opelika, Florida. Again, the number 33 overall player in the country, the fourth best receiver. The Tigers already have 3 receivers committed. And remember, with the recent defection of Ja'Kai Anderson, you could be looking to add a 4th receiver. You've got a couple of in-state guys in Jabari Mack and Kenny Darby, not to mention the number 1 receiver in the country in Tristan Keys, already committed. Russell would fit in nicely. He's number 33 nationally. You heard Shea mention Jamarian Carlton, the edge out of Temple, Texas. He is thought to be a heavy lean to the Longhorns. Matter of fact, the On3 recruiting machine has him 92% to Texas. But this is a guy, number 43 nationally, the 8th best edge rusher, 6'4.5", 230, offers from everyone. Someone you'd love to be able to get in the class and certainly fortify the edge rusher spot. When you're talking about what you have at that position this year, 3 of the guys you brought in from the transfer portal are all veteran players that will be gone after this season. So you would love to be able to fortify there. Trenton Henderson out of Pensacola, number 55 in the country. He does not have a heavy lean either way. Auburn, Michigan thought to be some of the front runners, but Henderson, someone one spot ahead of Henderson is Jalen Lott, the athlete out of Lucas, Texas, 6', 170. Again, he's thought to be a Texas lean, 58% there. But Lott is number 54 nationally. Trenton Henderson, number 55 nationally. And a really interesting to watch that you heard Shea mention there is Deuce Geralds. So Deuce Geralds out of Swanee, Georgia. You heard the context there from Shea. His dad played at Scotlandville. The family moved, but he still got family here. He went and signed with Frank Wilson at Ole Miss when Frank Wilson was on Ed Ogeron's staff at Ole Miss back in the mid-2000s. Well, now his son, Deuce Geralds, has offers from everybody. He's 79% to Ohio State, just 5% to Ole Miss, dad's alma mater. 6'1", 275. Remember what we've talked about here. If you're an everydayer, you've heard us say this. Remember what we've talked about with Kyle Williams, just the contrast in style, defensive line style between Kyle Williams and what Bo Davis was recruiting. Bo Davis was recruiting big dudes that were 6'5", 350. Sadir Mitchell out of the portal. Zion Williams in this freshman class. Bo Davis wanted giant size, girth, space eaters. Kyle Williams wants small, fast, athletic, strong hands, disruptive interior players. Deuce Geralds, 6'1", 275. Looks a lot actually like Bernard Gooden, who you just got out of the transfer portal from USF. That's the kind of player Kyle Williams recruits. A lot to sell and a little bit of family heritage and legacy there as well. And the Frank Wilson tie never hurt. So we'll keep an eye on Deuce Geralds as well. He's ranked number 93 in the country, the 6th best interior lineman in America out of Swanee, Georgia, but again, ties to Louisiana. Now, I also mentioned that a couple of guys are going to be on other campuses. Talked about Tristan Keys, the number 1 wide receiver in America for 2026. He's an LSU commitment. He's out of Hattiesburg. And there's no reason to believe this isn't solid, but he's going to take a visit to Alabama this weekend. I have often said that I was not a big-time recruit, and I don't have a son that would be a big-time recruit. But whether it be athletics, academics, or whatever, if there are schools that are going to pay your way to go on a recruiting visit, you should take them all. Someone's going to pay for your flight. pay for your hotel, bring your family, pay for your meals. You get to go have this experience. Like, life is short. Go have experiences. If at 18 years old, you have schools that are going to fly you all over the country on their dime, put you up, tour the schools, meet people, get these experiences to open your eyes. I mean, how many people never leave their hometown? What's the statistic? Like 98% of people never move out of their hometown. Like, and I'm not saying that's good or bad, but if you have an opportunity at 18 to see the world, football affords you that opportunity, my goodness, go do it. If it doesn't matter if it's Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Eugene, Oregon, Miami, Florida, Columbus, Ohio, whatever it may be. You want to go see the world, God bless you, go see the world. But make sure the road points back to LSU. We got to keep Tristan Keys in this class. The LSU staff does. Now, a player that LSU is trying to get into the 2026 class is Lamar Brown. We've talked about Lamar Brown plenty. He's been on the show. Lamar Brown is it's interesting now because On3 does not have Lamar Brown as an offensive or defensive lineman. They list him as the number 1 athlete in the country, the number 8 overall player. For much of Lamar Brown's recruitment, was thought that he was the best interior offensive lineman in America. Well, there's a lot of schools recruiting him as a defensive lineman. When Lamar Brown was with us on this show, he said point blank, he is primarily being recruited by Kevin Peoples as a disruptive edge player at LSU, potentially in this defense. So where he goes very likely determines what position he'll play, and where he goes will likely depend on what position that school is going to let him play. And if LSU is going to recruit him as a defensive lineman and he wants to play defensive line, then great. But Lamar Brown is taking an official visit to Miami this weekend. Shay had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, and look, they're not short on recruiting well in the Chris Paul era, and even more so in the NIL era. They've done very well. We've seen LSU even win those some head-to-head battles with Miami, who's kind of viewed as an Oregon-type team where, Bill Knight gives them an empty checkbook to go get some recruits. And obviously with the House settlement, rev share, all that will get reeled in a bit. But in the wild, wild west, it's been the past couple of years, Miami has done a very good job of recruiting. And Lamar will be down there this weekend. So will Tristan Keys, the 5-star wide receiver commit out of LSU. So they'll be there at the same time. And then we talked about it before. He had put Texas on his OV list, but I still think the two teams that anyone should be monitoring the most would be A&M and LSU, and they both have official visits to come. LSU will get the final one, and I still have LSU out front. I do think they're ultimately going to sign him, but I still think the biggest threat right now is A&M, just because they're the team that's done the best job of building relationships kind of across the staff, the personnel, and everything else with Lamar and his camp. But I like where LSU sits for the local U High prospect, and he's sort of jockeyed back and forth. Richard Anderson out of Carr is a 5-star as well, and those two have both been ranked number 1 in the state at some point. But Anderson on the D-line, Lamar Brown wants to play D-line, even though I think he could be O-line or D-line in college. We have him, Matt, ranked as the number 1 athlete, and I cannot recall a time when a 300-pounder was ranked as the number 1 athlete, but he's deserving of it because college coaches are telling him, hey, look, we're not lying to get you here. Whichever position you want to play, we're taking you. So he said he wants to play some D-line. He's been recruited by Peoples and Kyle Williams, so we'll ultimately see how that pans out. But, yes, the Lamar Brown official visit tour begins this weekend and will ultimately end in about a month with an LSU visit.
I want to correct myself because I said Tristan Keys is going to Alabama. Forgive me. Shay's right. Tristan Keys is going with Lamar Brown down to Miami. It is Kenny Darby, the wide receiver commit out of Louisiana, that is going to Alabama this weekend. So my apologies, my correction there. Kenny Darby with Jabari, Mack, and Keys were all on LSU's campus this past weekend on unofficial visits. So I wanted to offer that correction. My apologies for that. Lamar Brown obviously is a prospect that you want to get. He's the number 1 player in your state. He's the number 8 player in the country, the best athlete in the country. He's going to line up as a defensive lineman. And maybe it feels even more essential because you have 3 5-stars in Louisiana. Richard Anderson, the defensive lineman out of Edna Carr, is committed to LSU, the number 1 defensive tackle in the country. And then Blaine Bradford, the number 30 player in the country, the number 4 safety out of Catholic High in Baton Rouge, is committed to Ohio State. So 3 5-stars, you got one committed, one is committed elsewhere, and the remaining uncommitted player is Lamar Brown, the number one prospect in the state. So because you would obviously love to get that player, that defensive lineman, that incredible athlete who is from not only Louisiana, but from Baton Rouge and preps on LSU's campus at U High, who has said by his own admission, LSU is his leader. And the conversation that I had with Lamar, I can only tell you what I read into it. It certainly feels very strongly like it's an LSU Texas A&M battle for Lamar Brown. And we'll see ultimately what may happen in this, but it feels like LSU ultimately is going to win out for Lamar Brown. But Miami will get their chance to take their swing at landing Lamar Brown. And whenever you just kind of look at that position, of course, whether he plays interior, if he plays on the edge at LSU, remember in this year, Jacobian Guillory is going to be gone after this season. And if you look at Bernard Gooden, who you brought in via the portal, he'll be gone after the season. If you look at the edges, Jack Pyburn, Jamari Butler, Patrick Payton will all be gone after this season. Now, you've recruited some very talented young players, but the point is the door is wide open on the defensive line for meaningful snaps as a freshman in 2026. Listen, you're going to return Ahmad Bro, and you're going to return Dom McKinley, and Sadir Mitchell conceivably would be back as well, coming out of the portal. You could always have portal attrition. And you've got some talented young edge rushers as well. Like, I'm still excited to see Kalaj Cobbins. Dylan Carpenter is hanging around. You've got some elite prospects that are coming in for their freshman season here in 2025. And who knows how this season goes. But the point being, when you have a talent like Lamar Brown, there's a path to the field immediately for players like that. And here's hoping that he does end up staying in state at LSU, but he'll be visiting Miami this weekend. We'll try to catch up with Lamar after his visit to Miami to see how it goes. So a massive, massive recruiting weekend for the Tigers. When it wraps up, we'll certainly have a full recap for you next week right here on Locked On LSU. While the recruiting visits are going on, the Tiger baseball team will be playing in regionals at the Box. We've got betting odds on the Baton Rouge Regional. I'll share those with you as we wrap up Locked On LSU, your team every day. So whenever LSU popped up in the Baton Rouge Regional as the number 6 national seed in their 1-4 matchup against Little Rock, and we saw that LSU is playing the only team with a losing record in the field of 64. And then you look at Rhode Island, the number 3 seed, which is the lowest RPI among all of the 3 seeds in the NCAA tournament. And then you look at Dallas Baptist, which is a talented team. It's actually won 2 regionals. They've been to 11 straight regionals. They've won 2 of them to advance the super regional round. But LSU did play Dallas Baptist earlier this year and handled them in a game at Globe Life Field. So conceivably, this is a regional LSU should have no problem with whatsoever. And as it turns out, it certainly looks that way. LSU currently has the second best odds to win the national championship behind only Arkansas. Arkansas is at 4-1. LSU is at 6-1. Texas, Vanderbilt, each at 8-1. Remember, you can't win the national championship if you don't get to Omaha. So the fact that LSU, Arkansas, with the odds where they are, really good indicators that the odds makers think LSU is going to get to Omaha. Well, you got to be able to win your regional. Now, we also talked about this opening game against Little Rock. And my reaction was the same reaction that many of you had. 8-16 in the conference, the only team in the field with a losing record, a cakewalk of a 1-4 matchup. And then, shout out to everydayers, if you heard the previous episode where we had an exclusive one-on-one with Chris Curry, the head coach of Arkansas Little Rock, maybe spooked you a bit, because when you had some context, you realize that was a team that won their league a year ago, went 0-2 in their conference tournament, so they missed regionals. They come into this year, picked second in their conference. They're beset by injuries. They lose 6 everyday players for a chunk of the season. They get healthy just in time to make the conference tournament as the last team in their conference tournament field, and they win 5 games in 4 days. And all of a sudden you look and you go, maybe there's more than meets the eye with this 4 seed. And then the odds makers sort of recalibrate your perspective. Odds makers have the game lines for Friday. So for every regional game on Friday, and LSU isn't just favored to beat Arkansas Little Rock. LSU is minus 2,500, meaning you would have to bet $2,500 to win $100. That's how overwhelming a favorite LSU is against Little Rock. Little Rock is plus 910, meaning if you bet $100 on Little Rock to beat LSU, if they won that game, you'd win $910. It is an overwhelming landslide for LSU as a favorite against Little Rock to be able to advance. And it's one of the reasons why I don't love the idea of throwing Cade Anderson or Anthony Ianson in game one. It's why you typically pitch off in games like this when you have such an overwhelming, you are such a prohibitive favorite to win the game. Now, I understand anything can happen, but it's why Paul Maneri threw Austin Ross against Southern in 2009 instead of Anthony Renato. It's why we didn't see Aaron Nola pitch on the Friday of a regional. It's why you don't throw Kevin Gaussman in the Friday of a regional. You don't throw your ace in the Friday of a regional because you're such an overwhelming favorite. You want to save your best bullet for your best opponent, which would likely be the Marble game on Saturday. For whatever it's worth, LSU is minus 425 to win the regional. Dallas Baptist next at plus 320. So again, minus 425, meaning the Tigers, you'd have to bet $425 to win 100 if you like LSU to win the regional. Tigers, prohibitive favorite, will be here all the way through. Hey, thanks so much for making us your first listen every single day. Now for your second listen, check out The Portal Show, the rapid changes of the college football landscape. The Portal is on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. If you are on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked on LSU, your team every day.